Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Riders. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Chicago politics. We begin the infamous speech given by Governor J.B. Pritzker at the Chicago Convention for the Democratic Party. Remember that embarrassing event where the Democrats censored the party members who were pro-Palestinian? The Democrats told them, "You're not allowed to expose the genocide taking place in Gaza, Palestine." Here's a bit more of the representation that they had that night.
Donald Trump thinks that we should trust him on the economy because he claims to be very rich. But take it from an actual billionaire. Trump is rich in only one thing: stupidity. Now, I meet with business leaders all the time, and there's one universal thing they all need: people. They need more workers to fill all the jobs they have. But the anti-freedom, anti-family policies of MAGA Republicans are driving workers away.
Here's a moment that raised eyebrows across Chicago. Alderman Brian Sigcho Lopez confronted Governor J.B. Pritzker at a Veterans Day event right in Little Village, demanding to know why the governor was opposing a corporate head tax. The head tax, proposed by Mayor Johnson, would charge large companies $21 per employee per month for companies with 100 or more employees. Alderman Lopez argued that this was not some radical idea, that taxing big corporations is about asking those who have more to pay more, especially when working class families and immigrants are often left out of major budget decisions. But Pritzker didn't budge. He said he's absolutely foursquare opposed to the head tax, claiming it penalizes the very thing that we want: more employment. He warned that forcing companies to pay for each job could discourage business growth, making it harder to attract new companies to Chicago or even convince existing ones to stay. The government framed the debate around economic growth, not taxation. Rather than punishing corporations, he said the focus should be on growing the economy so revenues rise naturally. He also argued that Chicago's budget needs efficiencies, that city government should tighten its belt instead of leaning on a tax structure that he believes hampers business. Lopez fired back, insisting that the fight is not just about revenue, it's about justice. He told Pritzker, "We have to tax the rich. We have to ask corporations to pay their fair share." Audacity to which the government responded, "What we need is a progressive income tax, a graduated income tax in this state," which many in Alderman Lopez knows that the progressive income tax is not working. Let's talk about the head tax, and let's talk about conflict of interest. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying anything illegal happened. I'm not claiming anything is proven, but sometimes the facts on the ground raise a question that the public deserves to ask. Here are the facts. Governor J.B. Pritzker is part of one of the wealthiest families in America, the Pritzker family, whose fortune is heavily rooted in the Hyatt hotels and a long list of other major business holdings. This is not a secret. It's publicly documented. It's part of his story, and that matters because the proposed head tax would apply to large employers operating in Chicago. Companies with hundreds or thousands of employees, including major hotels, including businesses tied to the Pritzker family. Now, here's where the speculation comes in. Governor Pritzker has come out firmly against the head tax. He has framed it as bad for business, bad for the economy, and harmful to job growth. Those are his official reasons, but critics have pointed out something else. When your family owns a major hotel chain, and that hotel chain would fall under the head tax, it is unreasonable for people to wonder if that influences your stance. Again, we're not saying it does. We're saying it's a fair question. We're saying that when 90% of the wealth is held by less than 5% of the people, when billionaires are shaping policy from the top down, when regular people are being told there is no money while corporations fight every new tax. The public has a right to ask about motivations. This is nothing about proving guilt. This is about transparency. This is about accountability. If the head tax truly hurts the economy, show us the numbers. If it really threatens jobs, show us the data. But if the decision also happens to protect the financial interests of one of the richest families in America, then the public deserves that information. Two, conflict of interest isn't always about smoking guns. Sometimes it's about the appearance of influence and whether leaders are willing to address it openly. And right now, that's the question on the table. It's also reasonable for the public to ask how healthcare legislation is shaped when the governor has financial ties to Centenen, the parent company of Meridian Healthcare. Even if decisions are made through a blind trust, it's important that Illinois residents feel confident that state policy is driven by public interest. Let me take a minute to explain what's going on with Meridian and why it matters. Meridian is not a small company. It's the Illinois health plan run by a subsidiary of Centenen, a huge national healthcare company. Meridian manages Medicaid and Medicare services for thousands of Illinois residents. Here's the problem. Governor Pritzker promised to avoid conflicts of interest by putting his investments into a blind trust. A blind trust means he doesn't directly manage or control what's in that trust. In theory, giving him a buffer from his financial holdings and decisions made by the state. But a Better Government Association investigation found that his trust actually bought stock in Centennial, the parent company of Meridian. Now, this matters because the same company is getting billions in Medicaid contracts from the state. So even though he says he's blind to the details, there's a very real concern. His money's tied up in a company that does very large business with Illinois. That creates what many would call a conflict of interest. His role as governor could influence or be influenced by what happens to his own investments, even if he's not supposed to know when or how decisions are made. Put simply, Meriden is a big Medicaid insurance contractor. The governor's blind trust owns part of the company that owns Meridian. That means his financial interests could line up with policy decisions the state makes. And that's exactly the kind of situation people worry blind trust was supposed to prevent. At the end of the day, it's not just technical or legal, it's about public trust. When a governor makes decisions affecting Medicaid contracts, we need to know he's not doing it in a way that benefits his own wallet. And many believe this setup fails that basic test. Election year is approaching, and Illinois is heading into a governor's race that may be more competitive and more unpredictable than anything we've seen in recent years. After 2 terms under Governor J.B. Pritzker, voters are preparing to decide whether the state stays on its current path or moves in a different direction. On the Republican side, several candidates have stepped forward, each bringing a different message, a different experience, and a different vision for what Illinois should look like. Ted Dabrowski, a policy and budget analyst, is running on themes of fiscal responsibility and government transparency. I really don't like the fact that he worked for Citibank for 9 years. However, his campaign focuses heavily on spending priorities, taxes, and the long-term financial direction of the state. Darren Bailey, a former state senator and previous GOP nominee for governor, is returning with a message aimed at rural and conservative voters who feel Springfield has ignored their concerns. Sheriff James Mandrick brings a law and order perspective, speaking to voters who feel public safety and crime prevention should be the main focus of the next administration. And that's just the Republican feel so far. Additional candidates may still emerge. What all this means is that voters will have clear choices, not just in personality, but in policy and leadership style. Meanwhile, Governor Pritzker will be making his case for a 3rd term, pointing to economic stability, infrastructure investments, and his handling of statewide challenges. His opponents will press him on the taxes, affordability, and decisions like the $29 million that is being held by the governor for UIC and City of Colleges of Chicago, much needed funding that has drawn scrutiny and sparked debate. This election won't hinge on one issue. It will revolve around the broader question of where Illinois is headed, how we manage our budget, how we support education, how we handle public safety, and how we create a future that works for the whole state, not just parts of it. As November approaches, Illinois voters will have the opportunity to weigh all of this, the incumbency, the challengers, the priorities, and the competing visions. And regardless of who ultimately wins, the most important votes in this election won't come from campaign ads, party insiders, or press conferences. It will come from the people of Illinois. Thank you.